Hey guys, welcome back. This is Elevation Station. Thank you for tuning in. While you're tuned in, make sure you hit the like and the subscribe button. We appreciate it. As you can see, I have a special guest again. This is episode 4, and I got the third guest now. So our third guest, this is my dad. If you didn't tell by the title, he is also a pastor as well that I mentioned before. So I brought him on. And this episode, we're going to talk about forgiveness. And the reason why we're going to talk about forgiveness is because, as you know, Elevation Station, we want to, our goal is to be able to elevate not only how we live our lives and our mindsets, how we view different things, but there's some things that people go through, yourself and me, that we go through in life. And a big one is, being able to forgive people and also seek forgiveness.
Sure.
So who else, I'm not an expert. I know you're not an expert, but you're more mature and went through life
I'm
longer
older.
than me. Exactly. Got more experience. So we wanted to bring you on to help us out with this topic. So thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with you. I'm really proud of what you're doing, trying to reach people and talk
trying to
about
reach the
positive
people, yeah.
things to help us live more fuller lives. So kudos to you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Oh. So in our first episode, I don't know if you saw, but it was about the 5 love languages.
I did see it. Yeah.
All right. So there was a clip in that where I talked about. John asked me actually. He asked me, how was the experience telling you when my girlfriend at the time, Paula,
Yes,
got pregnant. So I shared about that experience and how that went, how I told you. And I said a little bit about your response, but I'm sure the people, now that you're here, if you could just touch on how that made you feel or your reaction to hearing that your son is now your son's girlfriend is now expecting your son's about to be a father.
Yeah,
outside of marriage at the time.
Yeah, outside of marriage, I was a little disappointed, but I don't know. I don't recall exactly. You got to remember the week you told me, I had just got back from burying my mom, and all of my, I was just kind of going through the motions. So when you said you needed to talk to me, I kind of figured, and I suspected that was it. I figured that's what it was. Yeah,
Okay.
and the only thing I remember is feeling like a little disappointed, but I was like, you'll get past this. It'll be all right.
Good. So that was that, and one thing you told, like, you didn't express that you were disappointed, so I appreciate that. When I first told you, so I knew you were disappointed, but your advice, like I mentioned in the first episode, was things were gonna be good, things were gonna be all right. There, and you showed a little bit of excitement for your grandchildren. So, anyways, moving on, forgiveness, right?
Yes.
We hear about forgiveness a lot. Like I mentioned, people go through a lot of different things, whether they were hurt by somebody, someone in their family, relationships, getting cheated on, or just mistreated. I watched a couple things. I've heard different things over the time because I had to go through some tests myself,
Sure.
with my wife and forgiveness and things like that. And I hear that forgiveness is not a feeling. Someone said it's a decision that you make. Have you heard that? And if so, can you explain, the difference between that? Because when I hear forgiveness, or many other people, they think you can't forgive somebody because it's a feeling that you're waiting for. You're waiting to not be angry. You're waiting for things to kind of settle down so that you can forgive them. And some things people do that never happen, so they feel like they can never forgive.
Great point. Yeah, and I agree that it's not so much a feeling as much as it is a decision and an attitude. It really is an attitude, and because it's a mindset, it's a decision. And like with many decisions that we have to make, particularly as it relates to uh, our relationships and our relationship with God. It's a decision that we make that requires faith, because many times you make the decision not feeling as if uh, the person deserves forgiveness or it's something that you want to do, but you do it out of obedience. And obedience requires faith.
Gotcha. So, and you just kind of answered the second question. My second question was, what if I'm not ready to?
Well, I don't know if I answered that because, you know, when we talk about forgiveness, you alluded to this in the beginning, and it's very, very true that uh, forgiveness will vary from person to person, whether or
Mhm.
not someone is ready to forgive, and it will often depend upon the depth of the wound. And it's not unlike it's really not always unlike when you have an injury, um, and or an incision that's been made. You know, depending on how how deep the wound is going to depend on what action you take to try to remedy that. And so if you don't do anything about the wound, then it just gets worse and infection sets in. If you make a decision to treat the wound, then you're moving in the right direction and healing can begin to take place. Well, forgiveness is one of those things that you do to begin to treat the wound.
Gotcha. And I think that's good because when I think about the womb and that's like that's something like you said, it has to be treated. It's not
Hmm.
healed yet.
Hmm.
So when people are hurt, it's an open cut, like you said, and you have to begin to treat the wound by forgiveness. And I think another reason why we should do that is so that wound can actually become a scar
Hmm.
once it's healed. It's not that you forgot. People say, and I was going to ask you about that too. Do you forgive and forget? You don't forget that you have a scar there. You
Hmm.
don't forget what happened.
Right.
Um, but it becomes a story
Hmm.
or a testimony of, hey, this has happened to me. I have the scars to prove it.
Hmm.
Um, but this is how I overcame, or this is how it healed. You know
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
mean? So I think that's good too. And then, of course, you use that story to help somebody else who has an open wound, letting them know, hey, it can heal. You
Yeah.
can get past this
Yeah.
and things like that.
But
So
I do think it is important to realize and recognize that people get to that place of forgiveness in different ways and at different paces. So it is a process, and particularly as you're talking to a broad audience, it's one thing for me to do something to offend you, to say something to hurt your feelings. It's another thing for me to violate your trust and to betray your trust or to do something that really steals or takes away something from you. Those are, and offenses vary. And so the process of forgiveness and the pathway to healing is going to be multifaceted. And so I don't want to make it sound like, forgiveness is something, hey, just do it and move on, because that's not the case. Many in this age of Me Too, many women have been sexually violated and abused, and the perpetrator has not acknowledged what was done. And so that person has been left to try to pick up and carry on. And that's not an easy thing to do when someone has stolen something from you without your permission, of course, and has really changed your life
mm,
in a violent way. It's not a simple thing to say, oh, forgive and you'll be healed. And it just doesn't work like that.
right. And speaking on that, someone that's deeply hurt, right? They've been through more than the regular person can relate to.
Yeah.
Um, I understand, or they might even understand or hear what you're saying about, yeah, I can be healed, but why is it even the person that doesn't even understand what you mean by I can be healed or I
Mm-hmm.
can get over it or whatever? Why is it important for them to forgive? Why should I forgive somebody that hurt me so bad or did me so wrong? What does it really do for me?
Yeah, and sometimes this is uncovered and comes out in counseling, and so sometimes people who've been hurt very deeply and over a period of time, it is not uncommon, and in fact, I would recommend, and I have recommended to someone to seek counsel because that road, that process can take some time, that journey. And the reason why it's important to take that journey is because oftentimes the byproduct of sometimes what has been done to a person can have uh, repercussions and show up in other ways. So you may have heard the term hurt people.
Mhm.
And that's true. So if someone who's been wounded and hurt very deeply and bad, they may act out in other ways. And so it's important for that person to get to the source of the issue and the wound and to forgive so that they can change and modify the course and direction that their life is going. Like here's an example, case in point. Someone, let's say it could be male or female, really, in our day, someone who's been betrayed and in a relationship, and in that betrayal, they've stepped out of the bounds. It was supposed to be, there was mutual trust, and someone has betrayed that trust, and so there's been an affair or something else outside of that relationship. So now that person, particularly if it happened over a number of times, not one time incident, right? But
Mhm.
let's say it happened multiple times, and so multiple times this blow was dealt to this person, and ultimately, perhaps the person even left and walked out. I'm not in love with you anymore. And you've seen it portrayed in movies, but it happens in real life.
Right.
And so divorce follows. Well, this person is not going to be an easy person to receive love because some of the side effects from the blow is not only has that person dealt this deep blow over and over again, but this person may begin to feel like I'm unlovable. And so there's something wrong with me. And so
Yeah.
I don't love myself. And so consequently, when I don't love myself, anybody else who comes along and tries to love me, I'm going to react with my defenses and I may attack or push that person away. And so it's important to seek to go down that path of forgiveness because unless you do that, you are going to be stuck in a situation and in a place where you're unhappy and don't even want to be.
So that forgiveness allows you um, to overcome what that pain that you're feeling right there.
Yeah, and it allows you, forgiveness allows you to be able to move forward. Oftentimes we're stuck. And not only because in the word forgiveness in the Bible really means to send away. It means to release. And so when we say forgiving someone, you referenced this earlier. It's not that I've forgotten what was done, but it's that I have released the person from the punishment or the guilt of that. And that's like, again, that's not easy to do, but it is saying, you no longer owe me.
Mhm.
I have released you from that. And so I'm moving on. I have sent that away, and I'm no longer allowing that to have power over me anymore.
Yeah. So it's like you said, it's like you're releasing yourself because oftentimes that person probably doesn't even care anymore, and you're just
Yeah,
holding
but
yourself
but
down.
you're holding that person
Yeah.
captive, and it does imprison you. It does hold, it does put you in a place. But by you releasing the person, whether that person realizes it or not, oftentimes someone who's done something may even be deceased. They may be gone, but you're still holding that person responsible
Mhm.
for for what you feel, for what you experience, for what's happened to you. That person is dead and gone. They're not even here anymore. But you must still release that person so that you can begin to heal and move forward.
Wow, that was really good. That was really good. I'm gonna pause right there.
Okay.
I got something for you. And this is our random question segment. And I got some questions in this little box right here. If you could just pull out one, I might have you do two, but just pull out one. These are random questions. I want you to answer those. Whichever one that you pulled out, read it and then answer it if you could. You just put one back. Which one was that one?
I don't know. Let's see.
He's picking through. The objective was for you not to read each one.
Well, I want.
They're all good, so you gotta read one of them.
Okay, let me take this one. This was the first one I picked out anyway. It says, "What is something you regret, or the most valuable lesson you've learned?"
That's a good question. Whoever wrote that.
Well, it's two different questions, so I'm going to take the second part.
That's why I did the second.
The most valuable lesson you've learned, because really and truly, with regards to the first part, I've tried. I try my best not to have regrets.
Right.
So there's some things that perhaps I certainly wish I would have done differently, or had done better, or mistakes that I wish I had not made. But regret. And so maybe those are things that I regret, but I think more than regret, I've tried to learn from them and move on. And so one of the most valuable lessons I've learned is really a simple lesson, but I've been saying it a lot lately, and it's related to this topic of forgiveness, actually.
Oh, nice.
And the most valuable lesson I've learned, I think, is that I could be wrong.
So you always thought you were right?
No, I didn't always think I was right, but as it relates to relationships, and as it relates to when you have disagreements with people, oftentimes we feel passionate when we do feel like we're right, and we have views that we hold very strongly too. We have things that we believe in very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think growing, the longer I live, the more that I realize that there are in many areas I could be wrong. And I think that opens up a whole opportunity, really, for that discussion and acknowledgement of forgiveness.
Wow, that's good. I'm not gonna have you pick another one. You passed the test. That was pretty good.
Thank you. You're so gracious. I appreciate it.
But all right. So we're just gonna wrap up. Again, I appreciate you coming on, talking about this topic. I wanted to ask you though, if you don't mind, if there was a time, give me a time when you feel like you struggled with forgiveness.
Well, I have had instances where I struggled with forgiveness, and I think most common have been times when the person who has offended me, or crossed me, or did me wrong, did not come to me and ask for forgiveness. Um, and so, one of those times is, oh man, there've been several, but let me take one for example. I had my wife and I had another couple that lived with us for a year. Uh, Very dear friends. We were closer friends with her than he. It was another married couple.
We won't say no names.
No, we won't say any
We won't do
names, but
that.
they lived with us, and this was before cell phones. So while they lived with us, we had, of course, a house phone, and the person ran up an enormous phone bill dialing 1-900 numbers. And so 1-900 numbers they were like those um, uh, phone sex numbers. Okay. And so I was really, this person was a Christian person, a person in an elder. And when I approached the person, they of course put up their defense. They denied it. They said they didn't do it. And here I am arguing with the phone company that I did not make these calls. And they're saying, I'm sorry, they came from your phone number. And so there's somebody in my house, and it was this person, because of their history. They hadn't just done it at my house, but they had also done it somewhere else, and they refused to acknowledge it. And so, they had to move out.
You kicked them out?
Or it was time. They couldn't live with us anymore. But the thing is that I had to forgive him. Eventually, I was angry. I was mad. And I would still come across this person's path. And I realized the way it was affecting me, that I had, even though the person never acknowledged it, never came to me to recognize, I'm sorry, da 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 da. I had to release that person from that, and be able to still be cordial, but really not trust that person again.
Right. So, okay, that's good. So just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean you have to trust them. It doesn't mean you have to keep that kind
Yeah,
of
we
relationship.
said this not too long ago. I was sharing, we were talking in a group, and forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation or restoration.
What's reconciliation for
And
those
so reconciliation is the healing of the relationship, or the relationship being mended, us being tight again. Forgiveness doesn't necessarily, it does not mean that reconciliation has taken place. And so, and certainly not restoration. Forgiveness is me releasing the person from the from the offense. But that doesn't mean necessarily that that I'm going to, again, now, if you owe me $100 and I forgive you for not paying me back, and I release you
you're not
from
getting
that,
another 100.
and you're not getting another 100, but
Yeah.
I am not mad at you. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like the sting is not there. When I see you, I'm not hurt. I'm not always throwing, it's not causing me to act funny. And so that is forgiveness. And it's not forgetting it, but it's wiping it out. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm not even worried about that anymore.
Right.
Forget it.
So when I see you, I don't have to be angry no more.
I don't have to be angry no more. It doesn't have to hold me, and I'm not trying to stay on you about it.
Right.
I've released you from that.
And also releasing people from that also means you should not talk bad about that
Yeah,
person
I mean, I
anymore,
think
too.
when you still feel some kind of way when you see the person, and it still hurts, and it's still, and you still want to see the person pay, you probably haven't forgiven the person.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we covered a lot. I got one last question
And I have one last comment. Go ahead.
as we wrap up, because we talked about being the one that forgives. What if I'm the one? Because I was the one in my relationship. What if I'm the one that did wrong? How do I ask for forgiveness?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And I'll go even further,
Uh-huh.
because a lot of people probably know how to ask or whatever. But how do I patiently wait on that person to decide if they're going to forgive me or not of what I've done?
And this is a great segue into my comment, actually. So I think, when I've been the one that's done the offense, it does require a certain humility to say, first of all, let me acknowledge what I've done. And not only acknowledging what I've done, but acknowledging how that has hurt you. I understand that I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And and in my being wrong, this may have really upset you, or dealt a blow to you, betrayed your trust, or wronged you, or was really inconsiderate on my part, and selfish of me. And so I think, so many times people go to someone for forgiveness and say, "Hey, if I did anything, forgive me."
Right.
But that's really not acknowledging what I've done. It's not me owning it. But one of the things that I think is essential is recognizing, validating the blow, the impact, the way it has affected the other person. And so owning my wrongness, and I'm sorry, it really, it could be something minor. I maybe I said something I shouldn't have said. I called you a name, and so I want to say I'm sorry for calling you a name. And I did not mean for that to cause you to think in any way that that's how I feel about you. And I realize that that may have caused you uh, grief, or may have caused you to doubt my love for you. You know what I'm saying? So in some way, I'm trying to say that in asking for forgiveness, it's not as simple, if I want to be sincere, as saying, hey, I'm sorry. But
Right.
it's acknowledging what I did, owning it, and acknowledging how that has affected you, how that has impacted you. And so my sensitivity and compassion to that then allows me to recognize that you might need some space. You might need some time. But
More
I
time
think
than I think you
it
probably
may
need.
be. And in the
Right.
process, it is also me praying for the other person, praying for the relationship, praying that they would be healed, because they have to also make that decision that I'm not going to stay in this place, that I'm going to take a different attitude, that I'm going to release this person so that I can begin reconciliation, or not, or so
Mhm.
that I can move forward. Remember, to move forward. And so the last thing that I wanted to say about that is sometimes people have taken that step, but I think it's also important that we learn how to forgive ourselves. And so often, people, particularly in that have made mistakes and messed up, we don't forgive ourselves, and so we hold ourselves back, and we don't allow ourselves to move forward. Yes, I've messed up and I've made mistakes,
Mhm.
but I have asked for forgiveness, and now I must receive forgiveness from God and pray that you'll be able to forgive me as well. But I've got to forgive myself, and I've got to be able to move forward.
Both parties.
Yes.
Wow, really good. So this was episode 4. Again, thank you for
Oh,
coming.
thank you for having me. This was a great honor. Again, I just kudos to you for the work that you're doing, and balancing family, work, and then this is a great accomplishment.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys. Thank you for coming. Thank you guys for watching. This was episode 4. Remember, hit the like, hit the subscribe, share. We thank you for your support, and have a blessed week.
God bless you.